Hello everyone, my name is Anthony Benning and I'm a professor of English at a community college where I primarily teach composition and British literature. In my classes, when I'm looking at the essays that my students submit, I get the impression that a lot of my students are more concerned with getting the grade that will get them out of my class than they are with actually struggling through the writing process. And so in this video, what I would like to discuss is, or at least to present to my students, is an explanation of why that struggle or going through that process is beneficial to you. First, I'd like to essentially, to use the cliche, address the elephant in the room, and that is generative AI, or large language models. To start, I want to explain or define what LLMs are, and these programs are like ChatGPT, Gemini, Copilot, those kinds of programs. Apple Intelligence is also another one. And I want to explain what they are, what they do, and why maybe they're not exactly the best option or best tool to use when you're trying to learn how to write. LLMs, or large language models, are essentially programs that have been developed and then trained how to mimic human speech. And they do this kind of in the same way that your predictive text does on your smartphone. So if you have a smartphone and you're typing a text and you have that option turned on where it makes a suggestion of what word might come next, it is making a prediction based on all of the information that it has been given, and also based on the information that it learns from you in terms of how you use that predictive model. So it makes a best guess. So for example, if you say something like good in the text, depending on the time of the day, the program might predict, say, morning as the next word that you might want to say, or it might say day or evening. That is predictive. LLMs are pretty much that same kind of programming, where they are making a guess based on the prompt that has been given to them. So if you put in a prompt into ChatGPT, for instance, it is going to generate what it thinks is going to be the most likely answer that you are looking for. No matter if that answer is correct, accurate, credible, that doesn't matter. These LLMs are not assessing the truthfulness of the statements that they're giving. They're just making a prediction by trying to please you, whoever it is that is using the program. Now the problem with this is that it, for at least from the teacher's standpoint, is that it produces writing that grammatically, syntactically, pretty much perfect. There's no errors, all of the sentences seem to flow very well together. The problem is that the program generally produces bland, vague, overly broad arguments that just aren't the kind of arguments that you're going to need to produce in a college level course. And that's a best case scenario. The worst kind of problem that is coming from that is something that we are just now starting to realize. A recent study was conducted by MIT where experts studied students who used generative AI to produce work, and they tested them against students who did not use generative AI. They just used something like Google to help them find sources, to help them with their essays. The writers concluded, or they found, that the students who relied more heavily on generative AI did not see significant improvements in their cognitive skills or in the skills they were supposed to be learning in writing those essays. The students who didn't use generative AI actually saw improvement in their skills, and they also found that they were more satisfied with the work that they produced because it was theirs, I'm assuming. Now, I'm seeing a lot of students using generative AI in a variety of different capacities, whether that is to write their essays completely for them, or to help them with the research process, or to help them with understanding. The problem is that the students are essentially shortcutting or skipping essential steps in the writing process. In other words, they're trying to skip the struggle, which I totally understand. Of course, as a former student, I was in school for a very long time. I totally understand that desire to try and skip a few steps, especially if you're stressed or if you are struggling with understanding something. But I want to stress that that struggle is important. It is part of the process. If you want to improve your writing skills, if you want to improve your communication skills, you have to say something and then try to revise it and try to clarify it, or try to find a different way of saying it, or encountering additional information that may contradict your statement or your belief, and then try to process that, incorporate that new information into your thinking process. That is part of the struggle, and that is what you need to do, and that is what students need to be doing as they are writing. Nobody writes anything perfectly the first time. No professional writer actually produces great work essentially on the first draft, and then they just send it to their publisher and it gets published and gets sent out to the world. No, professionals have whole teams of people who are, their only job is to polish up, to edit, to help the writer revise their work, to get rid of all the errors and the typos, and to format it so that way it looks beautiful. What you're seeing when you look on bookshelves or when you see an article published in a newspaper or online is the final product. Someone has gone through, they've written it, they've revised it, they've gone through the editing process, they had somebody else look over it to check it for accuracy, to check it for typos, for errors, and then it goes through that. Students don't have whole teams of people to help them with that. They've got, of course, their professors, they've got tutors, they've got fellow students to kind of help them through the process. But most students don't have the kind of time that professional writers do to try and produce great work. And so I think when students are comparing themselves, they see these professional writers and think, wow, that's amazing, I could never do that. And so they're feeling like they would never be able to do that, when they're missing the fact that so much went into creating that. A book probably took years to develop, to outline, to draft, to proofread, to revise, to edit, long before it ever even got to the publishing house, where there's a whole team of people looking at the work and also doing rounds of edits and revisions. Students don't get that, and they don't see that part of the process. And so when teachers do see essays that come in and they are just absolutely perfect, that immediately looks suspicious. It looks suspicious because we know our students. We know what our students are capable of. And yes, some of our students are capable of doing fantastic work when it comes to writing. But every writing has some kind of error in it. Even in the writing that I send out, when I send out my announcements to my students, or if I write instructions, I almost always see some kind of error, and I went through and proofread them. So if students are feeling the pressure to use generative AI because they think that their writing is not good, that's okay. You're in these classes to learn. You're not in these classes just to kind of parrot what a program is going to produce for you. And in order to learn, to use the cliche, you have to be bad at something for a while before you can be good at it. It's kind of like watching children learn how to walk for the first time. You see like little babies, as they're kind of barely standing up, they're wobbling. Before they even take their first steps, they stand up a little bit, fall down, they stand up a little bit more, fall down. They don't have the muscles or the balance to be able to perform the skill of running. They have to build those muscles, they have to build that balance, and they have to work at it over and over and over and over again before they can actually get up and start running. So another way of saying that is you've got to learn how to stand up, and you've got to learn how to walk before you can run. And that's what the writing process helps with. Going through that process is still important. And although generative AI may kind of offload some of that stress and strain that students are experiencing as they are trying to complete their writing assignments, what they're doing when they're using generative AI is they are shortcutting a lot of those essential steps. They're not learning to go back to the infant walking metaphor. They're not learning how to stand up. They're not learning how to balance themselves. They've just skipped ahead to the running part. And then they're concerned when a teacher who is knowledgeable on that topic and how to communicate catches them on it. Now that I've discussed why it may not be necessarily in your best interest to use generative AI to kind of jump, skip, and hop over a bunch of the more difficult steps in the writing process, I want to explain how the writing process can be also beneficial to your professional and personal lives. In your career, you're going to need to communicate with people. A lot of communication takes place over email, over text, over messaging. And I can tell you, I have seen a lot of emails come through where they probably could have used some assistance with communicating ideas. So for instance, I've seen an email come through that didn't really explain what it was attempting to say very clearly. And so that person had to then send out another email a few hours later, further clarifying those ideas. And if they had just done that in the first place, they wouldn't have needed that. And my assumption is that they got an onslaught or an avalanche of emails from a bunch of different faculty members and staff who didn't quite understand what was being said in the first email. And so learning how to communicate clearly, or at least struggling through that writing process, can help you with communication to fellow employees, to your employers. And that is essential. Yeah, you may not be writing a full-on essay, or you may not be learning or using a formatting style like MLA or APA in your career. But learning how to organize your ideas in a coherent and well-developed, well-structured way, and learning how to pay close attention to the details of formatting and presentation are skills that you can definitely apply to any career that you go into. On the personal side of things, writing can help you with understanding yourself. I've journaled quite a lot to kind of process my own thinking, to kind of recognize patterns in behavior that might need to be addressed. Writing has also helped me with understanding other people, my relationships with friends, my relationships with family and romantic partners. Writing can help you with so many different aspects of your lives, with just processing emotions, processing thoughts, recognizing patterns, and also just communicating. It can even help you with other people in terms of how they're communicating with you. For instance, you might be able to help them communicate their ideas a little bit more clearly, because you will have you'll be able to read what they're trying to say and help them get that out, even if they haven't quite got the words at the moment to express themselves. Additionally, there's a lot of misinformation out there, and unfortunately, there's a lot of bad actors who are attempting to try and sway you to a particular line of thought or to a specific course of action. Learning how to write and learning how to write well can also help you recognize manipulative tactics or arguments that are not being made in good faith. And that is an incredibly important skill, especially as we are continuously being bombarded by a variety of different social media apps and also information, videos, content, just all over the place. We are constantly being bombarded and we're being pulled in so many different directions. Learning how to write and struggling through that writing process can help make it easier for you to sift through the noise, so you can actually get to the meat of the information that is going to be beneficial to you. Now, are these the only ways to improve communication and critical thinking skills? Is writing just the sole method that people can use to clearly communicate and to structure arguments? No, there are tons of other methods and other techniques that people can use. But writing is a useful one for so many different areas of our lives. And although so much now is digital and visual, and so many people are communicating in a variety of different methods, writing can still help assist with all of that. Again, even if you never write another essay or see MLA formatting ever again outside of your composition classrooms. Learning to write means so much more beyond just writing essays. And so I hope students end up engaging with that process a lot more frequently and are not so afraid of the discomfort of learning. It is a good thing to be comfortable with the discomfort of learning a new skill, of struggling, of trying to clarify a specific line of thought. Not everything has to be immediately ready for you. Sometimes it just takes time. And I hope students learn to be able to sit with and be comfortable with the process of learning, and maybe not quite so concerned with producing something that is perfect. Thank you for watching, and I hope you have a good day, and I wish you good writing.